Hello and welcome to CNBC.com. I'm Frank Holland, the anchor of Worldwide Exchange. Right now, I'm joined by the CEO of Ericsson, Börje Ekholm. Börje, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Right now, I'm holding a letter, an open letter that you and a number of other European CEOs, along with some other U.S. CEOs, sent to European regulators to talk about AI regulation. Can you give us the high level when it comes to this letter, and what exactly are you concerned about?
Yeah, the letter is, of course, an open letter that we signed, and it's been led by Meta. And what it's all about is the fragmentation of European AI regulation, where you have the AI Act, you have GDPR, and it's going to be interpreted by many different agencies. So it's actually slowing down AI adoption in Europe. And the reality is, I think this is a bigger question than AI only. Of course, AI is such a central piece, but the reality is Europe is falling behind the US dramatically. Today, GDP is per capita is about 30% lower in Europe. Half of that is productivity differences. And that really is explained by the lack of a tech sector. So the concern here is bigger. It's just that the AI, I guess, is the topic of the day.
Let's get to the bigger concern in a minute. I want to ask you, you signed this letter clearly because you're concerned about your company first and foremost and your shareholders and maybe some of the productivity gains or margin gains in your business you could see. So if there were less regulation on artificial intelligence, how would it directly impact Ericsson's business?
You know, the AI is such a, maybe actually the most horizontal technology the world has known. It's going to be a productivity booster as well as helping to define new offerings to the market. That's a space we need to be in. For us, AI is really fundamental. It's the way we operate networks. So how do we actually run energy management? How do we do fault detection? How do we do optimization of the network? That's where we need to be competing with all the other vendors. And of course, we are European based. We have a large part of our R&D in Europe. And for us, it's critical that we can offer the market those products and solutions. So as you say, there is a big element of self-interest here. And the reality is, we have 60% of our R&D, give or take some, in Europe. And of course, we need to look at where are we going to put R&D in the future. So I do, as other CEOs of other companies, you allocate R&D where it's the most beneficial to put it. And we launched an R&D center in Canada just recently. It's kind of hurting Europe, and longer term, this I think is a problem for Europe.
Okay, so you say it's a problem for Europe. That's very interesting. You're not saying it's a problem for Sweden or one particular country. So I want to ask you, is the issue over-regulation or is it fragmentation of regulation from country to country?
It's both, actually. I actually don't think it has a value to be a front runner in regulation. So if you take the AI regulation specifically, what Europe has done is to become a front runner on regulation. And now, as I travel in other countries, notably the US, they say it's interesting that Europe has done this. Now we can learn what actually works and what doesn't work, and what hurts the companies, what doesn't hurt. So we are kind of a bit of a guinea pig in Europe, and I think that's not good for European long-term prosperity.
And to be clear, you say you're more of a guinea pig when it comes to regulation, actually not innovation, which is what you want to get to, like a lot of other Western countries and also a lot of other emerging markets, to be fair, like China and India.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I do believe innovation is the key driver of what I would call prosperity in the economy. So if we in Europe are going to long-term defend our way of living, the cultural values, our system, societal cohesion, it's driven by innovation. So we need to put innovation at the top of the agenda. And that doesn't necessarily equal regulation. I think we need to think differently. We need to say we are going to lead on innovation. We're going to make it attractive to invest in R&D. We're going to make it attractive to invest in CapEx. We're going to create a pan-European market, one Europe, etc. Those are much more important than focus on regulating AI.
So you hit on some of the upside gains if there were less regulation on AI. You mentioned GDP, you mentioned productivity. Is there any particular sector of tech that you're thinking of that would specifically benefit from less regulation in Europe?
Well, I think actually the interesting thing with tech used to be a sector in the economy. So if you go back 20 years, we would talk about the tech sector. The interesting thing now is that tech is no longer a sector. It's actually impacting everything in the economy. So if you think about if you're going to produce cars today, technology is a fundamental component. If you're in machine or kind of production machinery, technology is a fundamental part. So technology, we shouldn't think of it as a sector. We have to think of it as horizontal. That's the same thing with the industry. I mean, connectivity, it's very horizontal. It touches upon every part of the economy. Of course, you and I as consumers, we use it. But the interesting thing, what can you do leveraging, for example, advanced connectivity in factory automation, in automating ports, in automating logistics chains? So we are talking about these horizontal technologies in reality, and that's where the regulation hurts us the most.
So you said Europe seems to be, in your mind, a guinea pig when it comes to regulation, but I do have to say, Europe's also a leader when it comes to data privacy. Obviously, data is very important to artificial intelligence and training models. If you could talk to regulators about your need for data and how to meet that with the regulation that they have in mind, that's genuinely designed to protect consumer and consumer data, what would you tell them?
We have 27 countries implementing slightly different versions. And we get, for example, in the AI Act and the GDPR creates an unclarity. How can you run open models in that, for example? So if you think about the implication, it's just making it uncertain for us. Why would we invest billions in actually building products in the EU when it's an uncertain regulatory environment? So fragmentation, the size of the regulation is a problem here.
Also, just a short time ago, you mentioned logistics very briefly. I do have to ask you, the East Coast, Gulf Coast port strike here in the United States, does that have an impact on your business, either your ability to import products here or get products from the United States?
Of course, it does impact the supply chains, but we are relatively not affected by that. And that's because we are one of the few with a factory in the US. So we actually produce 5G equipment in Texas. In our own factory. So we are, to a large extent, less impacted, but over time, we will, of course, also be impacted.